Happy Labor Day, everybody. So, this is part 2 of the review of MLS Matchweek number 25, where we look at the last 6 games. Part 1, I look at the first 6 game of this match week, and I also got to remind myself that I still need to do the timestamp for part 1 of the review of MLS Matchweek number 25, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are wondering where's the timestamp for those games, and that unfortunately, I forgot to do it once the video was uploaded, so I'm going to have to do it once this video is over. But yeah, let's get into the last 6 games of this match week and looking at part 2 of this review. And we start off with Sporting KC getting a much needed win against the Dynamo as they won 1-0 against Houston. Well, it's not just a much needed win that they got in this one, but this was a must win for Sporting KC, considering the fact that, they're still chasing for those playoff position, and I believe right now they are, 3 points back of the last playoff spot right now. They're sitting right now in 8th place, I believe. Let me check. Or 9th place. Gotta also always remember to put the standings before I do this video. Yeah, they're sitting in 9th place right now, and they're actually about 5 points back of the last spot of the playoffs. And I talked about how Sporting KC, they're heading to a stretch where they're going to play a lot of these teams that they are, of course, fighting for playoff position. And Houston is one of them, which they, of course, were able to dispatch them 1-0 in this game. And the only goal in this game was Johnny Russell getting the goal from Smith and Gutierrez to give them a 1-0 lead. The second half, though, Houston did have a couple of decent chances to get the equalizer, and that in many ways, I think both of these teams was very evenly played in this game, where both of these teams had some decent chances. It looked like Christian Ramirez did get the equalizer for Houston in the 71st minute, only to be called disallowed because he was standing in an offside position, and the flag literally come up right when that ball hits into the back of there, which, we're going to continue to have this discussion of whether or not do you think it was a great idea for AR to raise their flag literally that late into an offside sequence. I mean, I guess with how VAR is right now and how the league has repeatedly telling the linesmen to, if you're not sure of an offside call, just leave your flag down, and then once the play is over, we can always go back to check it. But this time the linesman decided to raise it at the last minute, and when you look on the replay, it was pretty clear that Ramirez was in an offside position. And yeah, that was the final score of this game. And just to tell you how evenly matched this was, the stat lines was pretty similar, with both teams having 12 shots in this game. 5 shots on goal for both of these teams, 4 shots off target compared to 3 that Houston had, 3 shots that was blocked compared to 4 that Houston has, and the only stat line that wasn't similar is SKC at 67% possession compared to 33%. I know it says 37 here, but that's a miswrite right there. But yeah, for Sporting KC, like I said, they needed this win to keep pace in terms of trying to maybe sneak into that last couple of spot in the playoffs. And as for Houston, yeah, they are done. If the Dynamo fans didn't think that a couple of weeks ago, after just keep losing games at home and keep dropping points at home is a sign that they're not going to make the playoffs, this game probably is the sign of that, because facing another team that is battling for those last couple of spots, and the fact that they dropped all 3 points in this game, and that they have now got themselves, I think, with an 11-point gap to try to get to 7th place in the last spot in the playoffs. Yeah, I just don't see that happen with them having 6 games to go, and it's just a matter of time before they're, of course, going to be getting eliminated this season. But moving on into the next game is NYCFC. So they, of course, got a easy 3-1 win against Vancouver, and in the first half, 10 minutes into the game, they got off to a great start when Aber scores from Matrita and Rocha. Now, Aber came off with an injury in the 21st minute, and it looked like it was a quad injury that he suffered, which, if that is the case, that is definitely not good for NYCFC, considering the fact that injury usually take about 3 to 4 weeks to recover, and that, Aber is one of the biggest weapon and probably their main weapon in terms of goal scoring, and to lose him again this season is going to be a little bit of a blow to NYCFC for the remaining of the season. But the good news is his replacement, Mackay Steven, came on, and literally 5 minutes after he come on, he scored his first ever MLS goal to double NYCFC lead to 2-0 in this game. Now, in the 33rd minute, it looked like Vancouver won a penalty to potentially get themselves back into the game, but it was waved off via VAR, and, you know, it's debatable about this call of the fact that when you look on the replay where Sean Johnson kind of made a sliding challenge on Jordi Reyna, and then obviously Reyna went down into the penalty box, but, you know, it's debatable whether or not if Sean Johnson actually made any contact into Jordi Reyna or Reyna just kind of went down a little bit too easily. But when they look at VAR, they said that it was pretty clear and obvious that Sean Johnson did not make any contact of Reyna. That's why they decided to call it back and reverse the decision. But the good news for Vancouver is that they eventually did get the goal, and Reyna did get his goal in the 64th minute when he scores from Tosan Ricketts. And what's interesting about this goal is that in that sequence where VAR rule out a penalty for Vancouver, well, this play was literally almost the same as when they scored, when they, of course, got the goal in the 64th minute, where it was Tosan Ricketts playing the ball to Jordi Reyna, who, of course, went down in the box in the 33rd minute. That originally it was called a penalty, but then it was reversed by VAR, and that in the 64th minute, it's basically the same thing. And just as you thought maybe Vancouver could have some hope of coming back from this game, yeah, no. 72nd minute, Matrita basically shut the door in this game to give NYCFC a 3-1 lead, and with this win and a combination of Orlando City losing this week, NYCFC have clinched their playoff spot and becomes the second team in the Eastern Conference to clinch the playoff spot, while Vancouver has been officially eliminated from the playoffs and becomes the second team and the first team in the Western Conference to be eliminated from the playoffs. So now both teams that is at the bottom of the table in the West and Eastern Conference has been eliminated in the playoffs. And I'm going to, as I said, with FC Cincinnati, I'll do a moving forward series for them first, and then I'll do a moving forward series for Vancouver, hopefully either this week or maybe next week with this team. But in terms of shots in this game, 14 shots compared to 12 that NYCFC had, 6 shots on goal compared to 5 that NYCFC had, 7 shots off target compared to 5 that NYCFC had, and Vancouver had 1 shot that was blocked compared to 2 that NYCFC had. And possession-wise, 58% possession compared to 42% possession that Vancouver has. You know, it's an easy win for NYCFC, an easy 3 points for them to continue to climb up in the Eastern Conference. And for Vancouver, yeah, their season is done, and that they're just playing for pride right now for the rest of the season. Hope to build on next season, and trying to see whether or not who are they going to keep in the off season and who are they going to let go. Now, moving on into the next match is the Timbers. So the Timbers finally snapped their mini losing streak at home by winning 1-0 against RSL, but this game could have gone either way. And that despite the fact that Portland, of course, got the only goal in the 60th minute when Diego Valeri scores from Flores. And by the way, Diego Valeri without a beer looked like a total different Diego Valeri. Like, it felt like Valeri probably just kind of gone 10 years younger without the beer, which it's kind of always weird to see guys when they have a beard, they look kind of old, but then when they trim their beard, it just feel like they're in their 20s or 30s or something like that. But yeah, he scored a great goal to give Portland a 1-0 lead at that point. But the reason why I say that this game could have gone either way is because in the second half, RSL really started to come back into this game and started to have a couple of decent chances. And I also thought both goalkeepers made some huge save in this game. Nick Rimondo, you know, his best save was probably in the 71st minute when Brian Fernandez was just left wide open in the 18-yard box, and somehow, in some way, Rimondo was able to keep that one out. And then for Steve Clark, his biggest save has to be right at the end of stoppage time, which I actually didn't put this on the board, but Portland actually got a red card right at the near the end of the game when I think it was Zerbino that got a red card because he decided to put his hands on a referee. And when you decide to put your hands on the referee, yeah, that's an automatic red card, and that's also going to be not just one game suspension, but multi-game suspension, because anytime when you're a player, you cannot put your hand on the referee or make any contact with the referee. We saw it earlier this season with Albert Valise and how he got suspended for, I think, 2 or 3 games. I think that's going to be the same thing with Zambrano, which, at least the good news for Portland is that red card actually happened right at the end of the game, and the fact that Zambrano is not really a starter for them. But, Steve Clark, he of course came up big after Rusnak struck a perfect free kick that looked like it was going to go into the back of the net and tie the game up at 1 apiece. But Clark comes up big with that save, and that is how Portland was able to walk out of Providence Park with all 3 points. And in terms of shots in this game, 15 shots compared to 17 that RSL had. Both teams had 6 shots on goal, 3 shots off target compared to 8 that RSL had, 3 shots that was blocked for both teams. And possession-wise, RSL actually had 60% possession compared to 40% possession that Portland has. And, for the Timbers, it was not a pretty win in this game, and that in some way, if it wasn't for Steve Clark, this game could have gone differently, and that maybe RSL would have got a point out of this game. And as for RSL, this is kind of been what they have been this season on the road, and that we've seen this before with them on the road, where they don't tend to just they really try to make home team to try to earn all 3 points, and they really play teams tough on the road, but at the end of the day, they unable to get at least a point out of this game or get all 3 points out of this. Although, having said that, I think RSL has a lot to be proud of, and the fact that, I think with the way that they've been playing right now, and if they would have been maybe a little bit more clinical, and that Steve Clark didn't make some spectacular save in this game, this is definitely a very dangerous team, and that this is one of those teams in the Western Conference that you definitely do not want to play if the playoffs start this season. So, yeah, next up is the Quakes. So, the Quakes, in a must-win game against Orlando City at home, did exactly that by winning 3-0 against Orlando City. And this was actually a game that I did not attend, and that this is actually now the 3rd game this season that I have not attended a Quakes game when they're playing at home. And what's interesting about this game was that, the last game where I did not attend, which was between the Quakes versus Portland, and that they, of course, also won 3-0, and that they scored 3 goals in the first half. Well, guess what happened in this game? They won 3-0 and scored all 3 goals in the first half. Coincidence? I think not. But when you look at this game, and overall, I thought this was a relatively comfortable win for the Quakes. And as much as I'm very happy with the fact that the Quakes did not have to make it hard on themselves and doesn't have to put a gazillion shot on goal and have to wait until the 75th minute to kill the game off like the last game against Vancouver, I do have to question Orlando City and what in the actual hell was this performance for them. For a team that have playoff aspiration, and for a team that, are playing in this team and trying to keep up with teams that have already got resort over the weekends that's above them, and that they basically just lay an egg in this game. I mean, it was just absolutely appalling of how Orlando City played in this game, and that this game was really over in 33 minutes. And that in the 3rd minute, Eriksson scores from Jackson Yu to give the Quakes a 1-0 lead. It was a beautiful pass from Jackson Yu to Eriksson, who for once was able to show his clinical finishing and doesn't just put the ball into rosette like most of the times he tried to do when he has a chance to score a goal. And then 17 minutes later, it's the captain, Wando, that scores from Vaco to give a 2-0 lead for the Quakes. Now, I know Orlando City fans will be a little bit upset the fact that this should have gone to VAR, where it looked like Wando is just kind of on an onside position, and that, it was a very close kind of call in terms of him being in an offside position or not, and that in that situation, they usually go to VAR. But the fact that it did not go to VAR and the fact that that goal, of course, then will kind of definitely upset a couple of Orlando City fans. But hey, this is the thing with every single team nowadays, where you're going to get something like this happen where you're going to be very disappointed the fact that they didn't look at VAR for a very close play, and that, unfortunately, that is something that every team, of course, have to suffer. Do I like it? Absolutely not. And especially as a Quakes fan, I definitely know how that feeling of the fact that there's a close play and it didn't go to VAR when it definitely should have been. I understand that feeling, but unfortunately, that, of course, is the way it is in this game. And that 13 minutes later, it's the captain again, Wando, scoring from Espinoza, and this was a very typical Wando goal where, Espinoza basically plays the ball into the middle, and Wando, as a poacher himself, just basically tapped that one home and basically tapped it to roof that one into the back of the net to give the Quakes a 3-0 lead. And yeah, that was really it for this game. As for the remaining of the game, it looked like the Quakes really took the foot off the gas. And this is where I also want to say that to show why Orlando City was just so poor in this game, the fact that they in the second half, the Quakes, of course, put their foot off the gas, and they had a chance to maybe come back into this game and maybe do a little pushback on the Quakes in the second half, and the fact that they couldn't quite do that and still couldn't generate anything going forward, just to show that I think their playoff chances is definitely dwindling, and that this seems like been the story of Orlando City ever since they come into the league, where when it matters the most, when playoff is on the line and you need to have a good performance, they completely capitulate and falter, and this was another example of that. And in terms of shots in this game, 20 shots compared to 9 that Orlando City has, 9 shots on goal compared to 1 that Orlando City has, 4 shots off target compared to 7 that Orlando City has, 7 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that Orlando City has, and possession-wise, 56% possession compared to 44% possession that Orlando City has. And for the Quakes, like I said, it's a win that they have to have, which they exactly did that. But now for the Quakes, despite the fact that they, at the end of this game, they were actually moved up as high as second place, but then eventually dropped down to fourth place because the next 2 games that I'm going to be reviewing are the teams that, of course, were around them that unfortunately, of course, win, and that they, of course, drop a couple of spots below to where they were at the end of this match. But, for the Quakes, I definitely are nervous about what's going to happen with this team heading into the last month of the season. Because throughout this whole season, I keep emphasizing why, as we head into September, this is really the time where I am very nervous, and that this could really be a make or break kind of run for the Quakes, as they are going to be playing not just only playoff team remaining, but some of the best playoff teams that they are going to get for the last 6 games of the season. And heck, the last 6 games of the season, half of those teams that we are going to be facing during this September murderous row run is going to be the top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. We're going to be playing NYCFC on the road. We're going to be playing Atlanta on the road. And we're going to be playing against the leader in the Eastern Conference right now, that is the Philadelphia Union at home. And not to also mention the fact that we have to play the 2 Cascadia team, Seattle at home and Portland away on the final day of the season. And that in the next game, it's RSL on the road. And we're going to have to do it not only against a team that doesn't lose at home and doesn't drop points on the road, or doesn't drop points at home, but we have to do it in a depleted squad because of the international break. So yeah, I mean, I am definitely not confident whatsoever heading into this final stretch, and that's even with what happened in the last 2 games, where the Quakes definitely looked very comfortable, but that's because they were playing 2 of the easiest team. Now that they're going to be playing against the tough team, and that now, for the rest of the season, it's very up in the air of whether or not if the Quakes can come through that stretch. And at the end of that stretch, where they, of course, finish that game against the Timbers on the road, and that they, of course, will find themselves making the playoffs at the end of the season. I mean, I'm not saying that this team needs to win out every single game and need to win every single game out of these last 6 games, because that's crazy. Like, there is no way in the world they can win 6 in a row, especially with the stretch that they are in. But if they can at least get all 3 points at home and at least get a point on the road, or even at the end of the season, if this team can get more than 50 points, I think that should be enough in terms of them making the playoffs. And that if they do want to have a home playoff game and want to have their first ever playoff game at Avaya Stadium, they need to make sure at least win 1 or 2 of these road games that they are going to be facing, which is not going to be easy because all these road game remaining is against some of the toughest team in the league. So yeah, I'm very nervous of what's going to happen to the Quakes, and that I'm just hoping that this is not like the old Quakes team where I've seen so many times when the Quakes are in a do or die situation, they basically capitulate and they basically let the fans down at the end of the season. And that the only thing I will say about the Quakes, and I hope these players will take my kind of encouragement, is that just take it 1 game at a time. You know, we can't really look forward to these next couple of games. We can't just look forward to like NYCFC and Atlanta on the road and think it's going to be impossible. Just take 1 game at a time. Take this RSL game and think that this is a massive 6-pointer and that we need to get 3 points if we potentially could get a home playoff game, and then see how it's going to go. But moving on into the next match is going to be the craziest game of this week. And for those of you that watched the first 45 minutes of this game, which that is exactly what I did, I actually didn't watch the second half of this game, you would think that there's no way in the world this game would have ended 4-3. Like, in the first half, both teams was very disjointed, and despite the fact that Seattle did get a late goal when Ruidíaz scores from Ladero to give them a 1-0 lead heading into halftime, there was no way this game was going to end at 4-3. But then that's when the second half came, and that's when we started to see something similar to what happened last week in El Tráfico, where it was a very FIFA 19 kind of style of games. In the 55th minute, Rodon scores to give Seattle a 2-0 lead and double their lead at that point. But then 11 minutes later, Zlatan scores from Legit to pull within 1 for the Galaxy, before they tied the game up 9 minutes later when Antuna scores from Zlatan and Pavon to tie the game up at 2 apiece. And you think that the Galaxy had all the momentum, right? Oh, you're wrong. 2 minutes later, Morris would retake the lead from Ruidíaz to make it 3-2 in that game. And then literally 4 minutes later, as you thought that the Galaxy, their momentum was killed off because of that goal that they conceded, well, 4 minutes later, they of course would get another equalizer, and it would be the unlikely source with Jurgen Skelvik scoring for Polenta. 2 center backs combining a goal and an assist in this game to tie the game up at 3 apiece. And yet, just as you thought you saw everything in the second half, and just as you thought the drama couldn't be any bigger, 8 minutes later, Seattle would retake the lead, and it would be Christian Rodon scoring from Brad Smith and Jordan Morris to give them a 4-3 lead. And this time, they were able to take that lead for good and hold on in this game, as after all that madness that we had in the second half, this game ended in a 7-goal thriller, and the Sounders walk away with a 4-3 win against the Galaxy. And in terms of the shots in this game, you know, despite the fact that there was a lot of goal scoring in this game, there wasn't really a lot of shots in this game. 11 shots compared to 16 that the Galaxy had, 6 shots on goal compared to 9 that the Galaxy had, 3 shots off target compared to 4 that the Galaxy had, 2 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that the Galaxy had, and possession-wise, 40% possession compared to 60% possession. And despite the fact that the Galaxy dominate every single stat category in this game, they still come out of this game on the losing end. And if you're a Galaxy fan, this game definitely is a red alert in terms of this team, and that there's got to be some panic going on with this team right now, because I heard that after this game they said that the Galaxy have now only won 1 game out of the last 7 matches. And the fact that right now, with how the Western Conference is and how it's just all jumbo up, and that I said it before, you cannot afford, if you're a Western Conference team, you cannot afford to have a slump like this, because you are easily going to fall down the table, and that is exactly what is going on with the Galaxy. And that because of this slump right now, they have now dropped down to 7th place right now and only 2 points above the Timbers, who also have a game in hand over them. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely not looking good for the Galaxy, and that things are definitely looking bleak. And I know some people will say, well, they were in a very tough stretch and that they were playing against a lot of good teams, but with the talent that they have on the attacking end, and that they of course got some reinforcement in the defensive end this season, the fact that they're still not able to win in these big games not only tells me the fact that even if this team makes the playoff, I don't have a lot of hopes the fact that they are going to go deep into a playoff run, because they can't beat good team in these big games, but the fact that they just look like a very mediocre kind of team, and that you do not want to head to the playoffs in a slump, because if you do that, most of the time we see teams head into the playoffs in a slump usually get a first round exit. And as for Seattle, it's a good win for them as they continue to trying to get themselves higher in the table and trying to start a run so that they can, of course, make a deep playoff run. Although the thing that I'm still kind of concerned about the Sounders, and the thing that still tells me that maybe they're not going to make a deep playoff run, is that the defense is not very good with this team, and this game is another example of that. And also the fact that they do not have a lot of depth. And many times we've seen in the playoffs, you need to have a good depth in your team, because if you do not have a lot of depth and you don't have a guy that can, of course, step into the game once your star player goes out, this could really be a problem heading into the playoffs, and it's not going to give you a deep kind of playoff run. It might get you to the playoffs, it might win you a game or two, but I don't know if it's gonna get them to, let's say, MLS Cup, because we've seen many times in the playoffs it gets much more physical, and players does get injured more often in the playoffs because there's a lot at stake at that point. And if it's been proven that once you see a couple of these Sounders player that this star-studded player is not in the starting 11, this Sounders team just completely crumbles. So yeah, I still have a lot of concern of whether or not if they can make a deep run, but if they can, of course, continue to get these wins, and the fact that they will, in the next game, I think it can really proves to me whether or not if they can make a playoff run, because in the next game, they're going to have a lot of their star-studded player not available in that game, and that most of those players are going to be going on international break, and that if they could not win the next game, that kind of tells me that maybe they're not going to make a deep playoff run because of lack of depth. But moving on into the final game of this week. So, you know how in part 1 I said that the Colorado versus the Red Bulls game was the most surprising result of this week, where the Rapids, of course, won 2-0 on the road against the Red Bulls? Well, I take that back and say that this is the biggest surprise of this week, and probably one of the biggest surprising result of this season, where Minnesota marched into Bank of California Stadium, where no team has been able to get a win in the league this season, and yet they, of course, become the first team to do that and get all 3 points in this game. And the fact that I actually was going to attend this game, and that I was kind of this close to go to LA and attend this one, yeah, I'm definitely feeling very gutted and feeling very kind of disappointed that I actually didn't attend this one, because not only I get to see something that usually never happens at Bank of California Stadium, which is LAFC losing at home, but I also get to see one of my favorite player, or one player that I really start to like, and that I am just buying a ton of stock after this game, and I'm really so that he could be the next best thing for Minnesota and maybe in the U.S. men's national team, is Mason Toye. I mean, he put on a Hollywood kind of script of a show in this one, where in the 25th minute, he scored the first goal from Gregis, and what a goal this was, where he basically had a tight angle to basically shoot at that, but somehow he was able to put that one into the back of the net despite that. And then 4 minutes later, guess who scored again for Minnesota? Yep, that's right, it's Mason Toye scoring to get the second goal of this game, and that of course was the final score of this game. And I know I'm gonna spend a lot of time praising Mason Toy in this game, and that he's gonna obviously grab the headlines in this game with the incredible performance that he has put against the best team in the league. But let's also not forget about the Minnesota defense and also Vito Monone, who equally was as good as what Mason Toy performance is, because in the second half, and really after the 2 goals that Minnesota has, they basically just completely lock it down and basically kind of park the bus and hope that they can of course get all 3 points. And most of the time when I see LAFC play against those kind of team, they usually somehow find a way to unlock their defense. But yet Minnesota was just so good and so compact in terms of their defense, and Monone didn't make a couple of big saves. That is the reason why LAFC wasn't able to get a goal, and that despite the fact that they had 23 shots compared to 5 that Minnesota has, 8 shots on goal compared to 4 that Minnesota has, 12 shots off target compared to 1 that Minnesota has, 3 shots that was blocked compared to none that Minnesota has, and 77% possession compared to 23% possession, which is even more than last week when the Quakes had 75% possession against 25% possession that Vancouver has. Minnesota, with their well-organized defense, was one of the biggest reasons why they, of course, got the win. And also Mason Toy decided to have a Hollywood script kind of game. So, yeah, this was a big, big victory for Minnesota. And that, if they're going to make the playoffs this season, this is going to be one of those victories that they're going to look back and say, this is the vital point of them potentially make the playoffs, and this is really the reason why we are in the playoffs right now. And as for LAFC, I know people is gonna say that there should be a lot of concern with the fact that LAFC lost this game, but here's the thing: Vela did not play in this game, and it was pretty clear that his presence was dearly missed in this game, as none of the other player in this team could actually get something going. But for me, I don't think there should be a lot of concern with LAFC, and that, this is just one of those games. Every team have these games where they have a lot of chances in front of goal, but they weren't able to put it into the back of the net, and that their opponent defense just have a spectacular kind of defensive structure where they're just not allowing anything for their opposition to work with, and that unfortunately that's what LAFC suffered in this game. The only thing that I may be a little bit concerned is that what if LAFC have these kind of games in the playoffs? Because this season in the playoffs, it's a single elimination game, and this is why, as much as I say LAFC is the clear favorites of winning MLS Cup, I'm just worried the fact that, if they're going to have one of these games, which this is not the first time they had one of these games. I mean, 3 of the 4 losses that they have lost this year is against teams that you would think they clearly should have beat. Like, 2 of their losses again is the 2 teams that is currently at the bottom of the Western Conference in Vancouver and Colorado, and that this was one of those games that they were expected to win, but they couldn't quite do it. But, if they have these kind of moments again in the playoffs, I do have a lot of concern with this team. And this is why the single elimination does bring a little bit of a wild card factor in terms of the playoffs, because just because you are a good team and you just dominate throughout the regular season, it only takes one bad game and everything just basically collapses. So we'll see if LAFC can, of course, bounce back in this. Well, most likely they're going to bounce back in this. They haven't lost back-to-back games throughout this season, and it seemed like most of the time that they drop points, the very next game they get very angry and decide to put 6 past their opponent. So yeah, either way guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this weekend's game, and yes, I'll make sure I'll put the timestamp for part 2 of this review and also part 1 of the review after I, of course, press the stop recording button, which, speaking of which, that is exactly what I'm going to do. But before that, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.